Okay, good morning. Welcome to the Town Meeting Program, our local talk show here on KLAM. Done on demand, as needed, on AM 1450. Brought to you by Cordova Wireless Communications, a local operation we appreciate a lot because of their support for the radio stations here, both the KLAM and the Eagle. And in this particular case, they are the sponsors of this talk show, so we can discuss Cordovan stuff that matters to Cordovan folks. And yesterday, of course, was an interesting roller coaster of a day. I confess I was not expecting to be discussing what we'll be discussing. There was a lot of momentum, actually, towards focusing on the businesses that have been required to stay closed and having them start to gradually reopen, not turning on the tap fully and saying, hey, it's like there's no pandemic. It's nothing like that at all. And then at midday, we got the news that we had our first actual diagnosed case of COVID-19. So we'll kind of start there and recap the information released by the city about this first case, and then we'll get into what was decided at last night's council meeting and kind of take a look at what that means as far as how to proceed after having a first case and how to proceed specifically with trying to get some of the small businesses back open. So, reading from the city's news release, number 22, which I expect is available if you'd like to read these things rather than hear them, you can probably find it at covid19.cityofcordova.net. The City of Cordova, in conjunction with local healthcare representatives, have confirmed one positive COVID-19 case in Cordova. The individual showed no signs or symptoms and had traveled to Cordova from out of state. He was tested during a routine screening while in quarantine with his employer, Ocean Beauty. The individual is in isolation, and the company is cooperating with the city. Mayor Copeland said Ocean Beauty is in close contact with the city and healthcare representatives. They're doing everything they can to care for the individual and keep the disease from spreading. Copeland went on to say, knowing how quickly and easily COVID-19 spreads, we knew it was only a matter of time until it reached our city. We have a team of experts that has been working for months to address a scenario like this. We are ready, have implemented the plan, and are actively working to keep our community safe. Dr. Hannah Sanders, medical director of Cordova Community Medical Center, said, we're working with state epidemiologists and public health officials to ensure that the risk to Cordova remains low. The State of Alaska Department of Health and Social Services is implementing its contact tracing protocols and contacting people who may have had interactions with the infected individual. The Cordova Incident Management Team will notify and isolate additional persons as appropriate. All Cordova residents and visitors are encouraged to continue practicing safety measures to protect themselves and mitigate the spread of the virus. All individuals must practice social distancing, wear a face covering in public, wash hands frequently, and above all are encouraged to stay home as much as possible. So that's the city's news release on this that came out yesterday. There's also a state one. Let's look through this and see if there's anything different. Yeah, this one is actually different. So this one comes from Commissioner Crum's office, and it says a positive case of COVID-19 was announced in an out-of-state resident who had recently arrived in Cordova to work seasonally for Ocean Beauty Seafoods. The case was detected during routine testing done May 1st by the individual's employer, Ocean Beauty, while the employee was in quarantine. The results were returned yesterday, and the employee was immediately isolated from all other employees and anyone else in Cordova. This was the second test for this particular worker under the company's prevention plan. The first test, conducted on April 20th in Seattle before the individual traveled to Alaska, was negative. The individual was not experiencing symptoms during either test. The state of Alaska is currently reviewing more than 1,800 plans submitted by industries who are bringing employees from out of state to work in critical industries as part of the requirements under Alaska's Health Mandate 10. Ocean Beauty Seafood submitted a plan that was reviewed by the state of Alaska. Commissioner Crum said, "Our number one priority is the safety of Alaskans in order to achieve our goal of protecting all Alaskans while allowing critical industries like fishing to continue. We're working hard with all of our community and industry partners to approve plans that are as comprehensive as possible and provide strong protections for our coastal communities." End quote. The individual who tested positive is currently isolated from all other employees and local residents. The State of Alaska Department of Health and Social Services, with the section of epidemiology and local public health nurses, is currently investigating the case and working with Ocean Beauty to contact anyone who may have had contact with the individual. The individual was in quarantine, but according to the current quarantine rules, was allowed to have limited contact with social distancing with a small group of employees from the company while they were working. All of those workers will be tested again immediately. The community of Cordova is also offering testing, and actually we'll get into this part later about the new local testing options, but the news release goes on to say the testing that detected this particular case was done by Ocean Beauty. Crum also says federal partners shipped several point-of-care analyzers earlier this week to the state of Alaska to prepare for the fishing season. One 16-port, that's a fancy name, Cepheid. A 16-port fancy analyzer will be sent to Cordova later this week to support surveillance and testing throughout the fishing season. The other analyzers will be distributed to fishing hub communities throughout the state. So that's the press release from Commissioner Crum's office regarding our case. By the way, if you want to hear, if you missed it yesterday, and not too many of you did, judging from the number of views it's had on YouTube, but our announcement that we did with five or six different people about this first case. Mayor Copeland was there, Dr. Zink. If you've been following what's been going on in the state, you're very familiar with Dr. Zink. She was on the call. The CEO of Ocean Beauty was on the call. A leading state epidemiologist whose name is getting away from me was on there. And Dr. Sanders also was on there. And that program, it would be the daily briefing for May 6th, one of those ones with the blue letters. You can listen to that on the YouTube channel if you missed it yesterday, youtube.com/Cordova TV. And, of course, we'll have another briefing today in the usual time slots, 1 p.m., 5 p.m., 8 p.m. hours, and then they go up on that same YouTube channel. Okay, so that brings us to yesterday's council meeting, and hopes were high for the reopening of some of the smaller, what are called non-essential businesses. Things like hair salons. In the case of Cordova, the ones they talk about the most are like the hair salons and the Net Loft and Copper River Fleece and service providers that take care of services that you arguably could survive without, not joyfully necessarily, but I mean, you have to have food, you have to have water. You don't necessarily have to have a haircut. So that's what the whole essential, non-essential. It's interesting how that's been sort of turned into a value judgment across the country. Some hurt feelings over certain businesses being called non-essential. I don't think it was intended to be a value judgment as much as a can you live without it? Although, really, particularly a lot of places in the lower 48, some of the things that are considered essential, you really have to kind of go, okay. But anyway, all of that aside, it was looking very, very likely yesterday morning like businesses would be starting to open this morning. And then 2020 kicked us in the teeth yet again, and we had our first case. I mean, right on the same day that council was going to discuss this. So the council heard from Dr. Zink and Dr. Sanders prior to addressing the new version of the Cordova rules that would allow businesses to start, the non-essential businesses to start reopening. And the short story is that they essentially decided to postpone the reopening an additional 24 hours, which actually on the surface of it seemed like a good compromise because there were some people, Dr. Zink had kind of indicated that having this one case identified really shouldn't change the plans to do this phase one reopening of the non-essential businesses. Dr. Sanders, on the other hand, was a bit more cautious, saying that she would ideally like to be able to get into this, what they call contact tracing, and we'll explain more about that for anybody who doesn't know, because the city has a good document on it, so we'll look at that. But Dr. Sanders was more cautious and thinking that maybe the start of reopening the non-essential businesses should be delayed until this contact tracing was more completed. Through the course of the discussion between the two different perspectives on this, what the council ultimately decided was to postpone the non-essential business reopenings for another day. So the target right now is Friday the 8th, tomorrow, at 9 a.m. Now, we have to encapsulate that in a bit of caution first, though. That is a target date. It's not a 100% absolute guarantee that non-essential businesses will be reopening tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. It's very, very likely, but it may have to be put off if the medical folks discover that the person who is infected had contact with a number of people in the community, what they call community spread. What are the chances? In other words, what the doctors want to do is the local doctors want to verify that this infected Ocean Beauty employee didn't come into contact with a lot of people already in the community, that their exposure was just to other people at Ocean Beauty who have all been isolated and quarantined and so forth. That seems like the most likely scenario, according to what both Dr. Saunders and Dr. Zink said. But again, Saunders, being the local doctor, wanted to be a little more cautious. So what they decided, in order to provide some kind of a likely target date, was to put it off 24 hours, not open this morning, and instead open tomorrow morning. But I think it's important. Let me phrase it this way. If I was a business owner who had been shut down and was looking forward to reopening, I would keep it. I would be excited. I would be preparing. I would make sure my paperwork is done and that my plan to follow the state rules is in place. But right in the back of my mind, I would be saying to myself, okay, if they find out that this Ocean Beauty employee that tested positive has had a lot of contact with other people in the community, there's a possibility that the medical experts will say we need to delay a little bit more. Because, and the reason that is to not have this roller coaster where everything was to reopen with no regard for the contact tracing that needs to be done, discover after things have opened that actually the infected person did have a fair amount of contact with people who are circulating in the community, and then they'd have to shut everything back down again. So the idea is to try to be as consistent as possible, and that's why they decided to take one extra day, hope for a Friday the 8th opening, but with the understanding that if the medical folks determine that there's a bigger problem than just the one, then it may get delayed some more. And on the subject of contact tracing now, we'll go through a document here because we keep using that term, and for anybody who's not aware of it, the city has a document that explains that. And again, I expect you can find this on the city's COVID website. What does contact tracing for individuals, or who does it? Contact tracing for those who are COVID positive is a collaborative effort between the State of Alaska Epidemiology, the State of Alaska Public Health, and local medical professionals. How is contact tracing done? A public health nurse or healthcare provider begins a contact investigation to identify people who may have been exposed to a positive case. First, they determine the date of symptom onset, or if there are no symptoms, the date of the test, because a person can be infectious 2 days prior to the onset of symptoms. Next, they determine activities from 2 days before symptoms appeared or the date of the test until the current day. This is to identify close contacts who may have been exposed while infectious. And then they determine activities 14 days before that. This is to try to find out who or where the virus came from. It may take up to 14 days for symptoms to appear after exposure. So as an example, if you are tested positive or were symptomatic on the 20th of a month, the investigation would go back to the 4th. The investigation is done by tracing back your movements to try to determine who or where the virus came from and who may have been exposed. You'll be asked questions such as, when did you start to feel ill? Who is in your household? Who do you work with? What were your activities from 2 days before symptoms appeared until today? What were your activities 14 days before that? Were you within 6 feet of anyone for at least 10 minutes without a mask on? Did you share food or drink with anyone? Did you travel? And if so, where did you travel from? Each person potentially affected by contact with an infected person will also be interviewed and directed as needed by medical professionals. The person may be asked to get COVID-19 testing if they are symptomatic. They may be asked to quarantine for 14 days and or may be asked to self-monitor for symptoms and check in with medical professionals. The document concludes by saying each investigation may vary as each case varies. New information and processes are always evolving. We thank you for your patience and understanding and hope that this information is helpful in explaining the process. And again, if you want to read that, I imagine it's on covid19.cityofcordova.net. And we're a community, of course, where, it's not like New York or Detroit or someplace where they really have a lot of cases and the disease is rampant. Contact tracing for us is still a very effective tool to get sick people out of circulation. That can change, of course, if we end up with an outbreak where it starts spreading around. And this actually gets back to a point that we've been trying to reinforce a lot on this show, which is that as the businesses reopen, which again could happen as soon as tomorrow morning, it's really, really important that both the business owners and their employees, and I think the customers of those businesses, know what the rules are. because the system can fail and break down in multiple ways, not just the obvious. I mean, obviously, if a business that's supposed to be working under specific rules decides to ignore those rules, then they dug their own hole and are going to fall in it. And that's not a hole you want to fall in, by the way. Because, and I meant to look up the penalties and the fines, but it's thousands and thousands of dollars in fines, possible jail time, if you know the rules. And by the way, there should not be any business operating in Cordova that doesn't know the rules, because there should not be any business operating that hasn't signed a mutual aid agreement with the city. That's that form that you can get from the city website. And in case somebody has been under a rock and is listening to this show for the first time, hoping to reopen a business tomorrow, assuming that date can hold, you in order to do business, every single business, essential, non-essential, whatever, every single business that wants to be open for business, no matter how small or how remote, has to have one of these mutual aid agreements with the city. And as they explained it at the council meeting yesterday, basically it's a contract with the city where you are saying, I have read the rules and I will abide by the rules. I promise that's how I'm going to operate, and here's my signature to prove it. You have to, if you are operating without one of those mutual aid agreements, then you are subject to, I don't remember what the penalties are, but there are penalties, and they're steep. And there are not only local penalties, but very severe state penalties for operating outside the guidelines. So all of us in business need to have those forms in. And I know I've said it a number of times, but we did ours. It was easy. Sign, turn it in. Yes, we know what the rules are. We're going to follow them. But in a community like ours, where everybody is hopefully working together to make sure that a reopening of businesses works safely and doesn't make things worse, because that's our mindset, I think it's good for all of us as customers to take some time to also look at the rules for the type of business that we might be able to start patronizing tomorrow that we haven't been able to patronize in a while, like dining in at a restaurant. I don't know if any of our restaurants are going to start to reopen their dine-in service if they're allowed to. I've heard from a number of them that have said, no, we're going to stay with takeout. We're going to really err on the side of caution and stay that way. But say, for example, your favorite restaurant is going to reopen under the rules, and you want to go. I think it would be a real good idea to go to the state website, look up Mandate 16, and under Mandate 16, find the attachment for the restaurants, so that you know what to expect when you go to that restaurant. Because what happens when customers don't know what to expect is they'll show up and the restaurant person will say, well, I'm sorry, we can't take you as a walk-in. You need to have reservations. And, the customer will say, well, wait, the customer's always right. Or, I thought it was this, and now you're telling me it's this. And, you see that kind of stuff happen. Or you make your reservation, but you don't bring a mask because the rules at the state and local level require wearing a mask if you're going to dine in at a restaurant, except obviously to put food in your mouth. But like while you're coming in or while you're going out, while you're moving around, and, somebody shows up and is not familiar with the rules and they don't have a mask, and the restaurateur says, well, I'm sorry, without a mask you can't come in. And then people lose their minds over stuff like that just because they don't know what to expect. And that's why I think that if you want to go to a restaurant, take a look at the rules for restaurants on the state site. If you want to go have a haircut, go do the same thing, so that all of us as customers, so that we, the customers, are not giving the business owners extra stress by getting in their faces while they're trying to follow the rules. And if we as customers don't know them and get frustrated by that, you can see where that goes. And there have been some extraordinary reports coming out of the lower 48 of customers who don't know what's going on getting frustrated when they're told you have to have a mask or we can't let you in without a reservation or whatever, and they are losing their minds. It's being caught on video, and it's so stupid. I don't want to drag this show down by describing it, but it is mind-blowingly stupid. So, why not have both our non-essential business owners and non-essential business customers look at the rules, know what everybody's supposed to do going into it, and at the very least, to the customers, if you're not going to take the time to read the rules, keep an open mind and be ready to be told by a business owner or a staff member at a business that you may need to go home and come back or do something, take an extra step as part of the learning curve, so that we get this nice balance between the businesses who want to serve people and the people who want to be served by the businesses. We strike a balance point so everybody has good interaction. This is the town meeting talk show for May the 7th, the day after our first case was discovered. Again, the word from council is they hope to be able to green light the reopening of non-essential businesses tomorrow, the 8th at 9 a.m., going from condition red to condition yellow, which hopefully we can stay at unless people mess up, in which case we go back to red. So hopefully we can avoid messing up. Told you that there is some new testing service available, and we'll go over how that works here now. Free drive-up COVID testing is available each weekday now, and it's for new arrivals from out of state in the past 14 days. So anybody that has been here less than 2 weeks from out of state, free drive-up COVID testing, Monday through Friday between 2 and 4 p.m. Now, on Monday and Wednesday, Alanka Community Health Center takes the lead, and they're going to do theirs downstairs across from the Episcopal Church. Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday from 2 to 4, CCMC handles it, and they will do that in the ambulance bay. See, it's this I love how our institutions are getting together and working together and sharing this responsibility. So it's 2 to 4 p.m. each weekday, Monday and Wednesday with Alanka, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday in the ambulance bay at CCMC. And what you do is call ahead. If it's an Alanka day, call ahead to 424-3622. If it's a CCMC day, 424-8000. You complete a required pre-registration, which can save you time if you do that in advance, obviously. Again, 3622 for Alanka and 424-8000 for CCMC. And call them also if you're not able to access those times, that 2 to 4 p.m. window. If that doesn't work for you, give them a call because they say they can make arrangements to accommodate your schedule. So something that, what's good about this is that something that the community has said very much that it wants is more testing, not just for the symptomatic people, per the CDC guidelines, but being able to expand it to become an even more preventative mechanism. In other news, something else from Commissioner Crum that was just announced having to do with new COVID-19 behavioral health resources for providers. Because if anybody is under stress during this whole thing, those people on the front lines. So this is, let's take a look at this. It says your well-being This is speaking to providers of long-term services and supports. Your well-being and emotional resilience are important to the state of Alaska. Recognizing the unique challenges you face, the Division of Behavioral Health is here to support you. We've established a 24/7 general counseling and support line for healthcare and behavioral professionals impacted by COVID, personally and professionally. Staff supporting the call line recognize callers are often first responders and will allow you to openly express your experiences and feelings serving Alaskans impacted by COVID. The call line is there to support callers experiencing crisis, isolation, and depression. The counseling line will provide a handoff to a local Alaska behavioral health professional for ongoing support as applicable. Services are also available to immediate family members of first responders who may be experiencing stress, anxiety, and other hard-to-label emotions as a result of their loved ones engaging on the front lines. So this is a special Alaska Responders Relief Line. I assume that's doctors, nurses, EMTs, police, fire. So special assistance for them at 844-985-8275. 844-985-8275. And I would imagine that information is also on the state or city websites. Something else I just remembered from the council meeting last night that was interesting was they had an agenda item that just is so they can converse a little bit and ask questions about general COVID response in the city, not specific to the business thing, but a broader conversation. And Tom Baylor, I think it was talking about increased safety at the gas pumps because there's obviously a lot of touching there, and sanitizer is really hard to come by. And so they're working on trying to, see if the city can assist with having a sanitizer station there. I'll tell you what we do that has been, we found the Clorox wipes to be a little easier to come by. And so when we get gas, we just, and then we also keep sanitizer in the car. But one of those disinfecting wipes, for example, I'm left-handed, so I put that on my left hand and get out of the car, wipe down the keypad and also the gas pump handle, and then do the whole credit card thing and pump the gas, but always keeping that wipe in my hand. Now, I know some people don't like making contact with the chemicals or whatever, and I'm not suggesting it's a great idea. It works for us, and my hand hasn't fallen off yet from Clorox exposure. So, plus, I like to think left the handle a little cleaner maybe than it was when we arrived. So that might be an alternative. But the point is, the city is very aware that that's a high contact point. They also reinforced, by the way, an important difference, back to the subject of masks, an important difference between Cordova's rules and the state's rules, in that Cordova's masking rule is mandatory basically when you go into any public area, and not public in the tax dollar owned, but any public space, including private public spaces, like restaurants, like a quilt shop, like the flea shop, grocery store, anything. Everybody that goes into one of these places is supposed to be masked. And I don't know if all the business owners are aware of this. Council said they thought that they had seen some people unmasked in some of these businesses, which actually is not allowed according to the city rules, unless you're in there completely by yourself, I guess. But you're supposed to have it easily. If you don't have it on, it should probably be down around your chin or something, so you can put it up in case anybody comes into your area. Because particularly if, you're not masked and you approach somebody else. That's the whole thing that this system is designed to avoid. So expect that anytime you enter a grocery store, the post office, a restaurant, a small business, a salon, whatever, anytime you go in some place where people congregate, the city requires masking, and they wanted to reinforce that Cordova's rules are still a little tighter on that than the broader state rules. Something that's interesting, too, is the state rules are actually scheduled to loosen up a little bit more. Some of the 25% capacity restrictions go to 50. Some of the group sizes grow. And I don't know if the city has, I'd have to go back and look and see. So this is something you'll want to do research on, and I will also. And maybe we can talk about this in the briefing later. Is the city planning to defer to the state rules now? Is that the pivot point where they're, as they look to begin reopening the non-essential businesses? Are they just going to be in sync with the state, or will Cordova's rules hold fast to the phase 1 part of the state reopening plan? Because the state has identified 5 phases for reopening, and it's been 2 weeks now that the state as a whole has been in phase 1. And Dunleavy said yesterday, I'm pretty sure, that the state is ready to go to phase 2. So that's something that I would urge folks to look up. I don't have the answer right now, but maybe we can address that in the briefing. But briefing or talk show or whatever, remember, always the best way to be sure about something is not to listen to somebody speculating on it. And I'll put myself right at the top of that list. I'm not going, I am the complete opposite of a Rush Limbaugh or somebody like that says, oh, well, I know everything and ditto. No, I'm just doing my best to share the information, the quality information that comes across my desk. The best thing to do always is to look at original documents, and in the case of council meetings, for example, to listen to the original council meeting. I do my best to interpret, but that's all it is an interpretation. And the same thing with the documents. So if you really want to see what's happening as far as the proposed reopening of non-essential local businesses, look at the city's website, the Emergency Order 2020. That's the one that continues to get revised. Or you can find the revised version in the packet from yesterday's special meeting too. Emergency Order 2020 in its latest iteration, I think it's -6, 2020-6. And then at the state level, you want to look for Mandate 16 and all of those attachments that are part of it. Because you've got the overall Mandate 16, and then you've got the sub-documents for restaurants. There's one for personal care. There's one for public-facing businesses, non-public-facing businesses, whatever all the categories are. They're all in there, and you can read it, and you'll know precisely what's going on. And again, businesses can choose to operate in a more restrictive fashion than the law allows if that's what they decide. For example, if we get to the point that a limited amount, let's use restaurants again as an example, or even salons. Say that the state rules relax to the point that a limited amount of walk-in business is now allowed. Well, no restaurant or salon or any other type of business is obligated to loosen that restriction just because they can. If I was a restaurant owner getting ready to open up, and I heard that I could take walk-ins, but I wasn't comfortable with taking walk-ins, and I wanted to keep it reservation only, then that's precisely what I'd do. Because what I'd want to do as a restaurant owner is be able to make contact with the potential customers prior to them arriving and possibly contaminating my facility because they're, people from different households, or they're doing something, the customers are doing something they're not supposed to do. So if you take a reservation, you can say, "Hi, thanks for calling restaurant." And the person says, "Yes, we have a party of 3. We'd like to come in and have lunch." And you can say, "Okay, that's great. Have you traveled recently? Have you had any symptoms? Have you, whatever." Some sort of pre-screening questions. Are you all from the same household? That's a big one right now until something changes it. But any group that sits together at a restaurant is supposed to be from the same household. Are you all from the same household? Oh, no, it's a group of us from work. Well, sorry, we can't help you yet, unless you all want to sit at different tables. But mom, dad, and kid that all live in the same household, they can sit together at a table. And then other people can sit at other tables at least 10 feet away from those people. So, business owners are completely empowered. And same with masking. A business not only right now has a legal obligation to turn away somebody not wearing a mask, but they also have every right to turn away somebody not wearing a mask if that business believes that everyone in their business should be wearing a mask. I mean, there was this hilarious blow-up over when Costco started requiring masks. And there were people out there saying, "Well, I'm not going to shop with them anymore," and all that. And that's fine. I mean, it's America. You don't have to shop with Costco if you don't like their business practices. But some people were going as far as to say, "Well, if Costco wants me to wear a mask, they need to provide me one." What? Since when has that ever been? I mean, it'd be neat if they could. Like they provide a shopping cart and other stuff. But, the reaction I loved to that with people with more common sense is to say, look, restaurants have no shirt, no shoes policies, and you're not, they don't have an obligation to provide you shirt and shoes if you show up and I want to go into your business. Well, you have to have shirt and shoes. Well, then you need to provide me shirt and shoes. This must be what happens when people spend too much time alone inside. I just don't. So anyway, we're just throwing out ideas. You do with them as you wish. I want to get on to some more positive stuff now as we get into the fourth quarter of the program. Class of 2020 announces Cordova Junior Senior High's 100th commencement virtually. We can't all get together in the gym, so we get to watch it on YouTube. May 16th at 5:30 p.m., it will be broadcast via the school's YouTube channel, which they call Cordova Wolverines Live Event Streaming. I would assume you can get that through the school website. And then, of course, as we said yesterday, they're going to have that parade, which I'm psyched about because we get to provide the soundtrack for it on the radio. We'll be the background music while everybody is waving and celebrating and doing so with social distancing and masks if you're close to people. So some real creative work on the part of our schools trying to deal with this weird year and still be able to celebrate graduation. So you can watch that ceremony online. And again, what you'll see online is a number of videos that were shot for days prior, and then they edit the whole thing together because the graduate and their family get to witness the graduate picking up their diploma, and then there may be some photo ops. And that happens group by group by group so they can maintain social distancing and clean things and all of that. But then all those individual videos will be put together into one video, and that's what they're going to stream out on May 16th at 5:30 p.m. And then after that is the parade from the ferry terminal to the little airport by Eyak Lake. Very good idea. And if that's not enough positivity for you, well, let's conclude this challenging day after program by having some fun here. Well, no, of course, this isn't fun There is confusion about what we as Americans are supposed to do. And I think that if you spend just the next 3.5 minutes listening to this guidance from a concerned citizen who recently held a press conference, it'll clear a lot of things up for you. So with no further ado, get ready for clarity.
Yeah, I really don't understand why everybody isn't following the same rules right now. They're very clear, so let's take a minute and let's go over them again. First, you must not leave the house for any reason, unless of course you have a reason, and then you may leave the house. All stores are closed except those that are open, and all stores must close unless, of course, they need to stay open. This virus is deadly, but don't be afraid of it. It can only kill people who are vulnerable and also those who are not vulnerable. We should stay locked down until the virus stops infecting people. And it will only stop infecting people if enough of us get infected that we build immunity. So it is very important that we get infected and also do not get infected. You should not go to the doctor's office or the hospital unless you have to go there. Unless, of course, you are too sick to go there. This virus has no effect on children except for those children in which it affects. The virus remains active on different surfaces for 2 hours or 4 hours or 6 hours, but in most cases it's days and not hours, and it needs a damp environment or a cold environment that is warm and dry in the air, unless the air is plastic. Schools are closed, so you need to homeschool your children unless you can send them to school because you are not home. If you are at home, you can school your children using various portals and online classrooms unless you have poor internet, more than one child, only one computer, or you are working from home. Baking cakes can be considered math, science, or art. If you are home educating, you can include household chores within their education curriculum. And if you are home educating, you may start drinking at approximately 10 a.m. every day. If you are not home educating children, you may also start drinking at approximately 10 a.m. Masks are useless at protecting you against the virus, but you still need to wear one because it can save lives. And in some cases, it may even be mandatory, but also maybe not. You must not go to work, but you can get another job, at which point you may go to work. Stay home. I don't know how many more celebrities we need to have tell you how important it is to go outside and take care of your mental health. There is no shortage of groceries in the supermarket. There are simply many things missing. You don't need to go buy a bunch of toilet paper, but you should buy some in case you need it. If you are sick, you may go out once you are better, but those in your household, they cannot go out once you are better unless, of course, they need to go out. Animals are not affected by the virus, except for that cat that tested positive in Belgium in February, plus a couple tigers. The number of corona-related deaths will be announced daily, but we don't know how many people are infected because we were only testing those who are almost dead to determine if that's what they will die of. The people who die of corona who are not counted won't or will be counted, but maybe not. To help protect yourself during these times, you should be eating well and exercising, but exercising only eating what you have at home to avoid going to the stores unless you need toilet paper or a fence panel. It's important to get fresh air, but don't go to parks, but do go walk in other places. Just don't sit down unless you are old or pregnant. But if you do sit down, don't sit for too long. Unless you are old and you are pregnant, in which case you need to sit down. But if you do sit down, don't eat unless you've had a long walk, which you are allowed to do if you are old or pregnant, except for times in which you aren't. Don't visit old people, but you have a moral obligation to take care of old people and bring them food and medicine. And finally, no businesses will go down due to coronavirus except those businesses that go down due to COVID-19. I hope this cleared up any questions about what we should and should not be doing during this time. Please educate your friends and family with this information so we can remove any and all confusion surrounding this time. Thank you.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is 3.5 minutes of your life that you cannot have back. It will also conclude our town meeting talk show on this 7th of May. Remember, if you want to hear yesterday's briefing with the mayor and Dr. Zink and Ocean Beauty and the other guests who joined us, Dr. Sanders among them, that is available on our YouTube channel. It's the daily briefing for the 6th. Go to youtube.com/Cordova TV. This program will be put on there as well if you missed some of it or want to share it with anybody else. And actually all of our COVID-related content, as we've been telling you, youtube.com/Cordova TV. This show is brought to you by Cordova Wireless Communications. That's very important because that makes it possible for us to do this and try to bring you the best information we can. And we assure you we will always try to bring you important information until the information is no longer important, in which case we won't, unless it becomes important again, in which case we will. Because reasons.